And now for something completely different, we are going to start looking at mercantilism and the economic side of the relationship between Great Britain and its colonies. Quick note, I use Great Britain and England pretty interchangeably if you haven't noticed already. They aren't exactly the same thing, but for this class, you can use them pretty much interchangeably. So whether I'm saying the British colonies or the English colonies, same thing. So, when we're looking at the economic development between the relationship of these two areas, and basically the British colonies, we have to see that England's leaders very much viewed the colonies as really indispensable. The thing is, the British colonies are going to supply the raw materials to England that were basically unavailable there. And on top of that, they're going to be a source of a healthy market to buy then English manufactured goods. And so we're going to see that they're going to knit in the colonies into the British Empire more so through commercial legislation than anything else. And the thing is, the colonial societies at this time, they like this, they want this, and they really wanted to resemble England and integrate their economy into that of the economy of their mother country. So how do we see this exactly? We see this mostly through mercantilism. So mercantilism, we have to define, was basically an economic system that the government intervenes in the economy for the purpose of increasing national wealth. I'm going to say that one more time. It's an economic system that the government intervenes in the economy for the purpose of increasing national wealth. Quick note on this, you want to generally have your exports exceed your imports. You want to be selling more than you are buying, because that means that you're increasing your national wealth. Now, the colonies are going to play a really crucial role in all this because they have those raw materials. They're supplying a lot of items that English consumers otherwise would have had to purchase from foreign competitors. And so that means that when they're buying timber, beaver furs, so many other raw materials from the British colonies, they're keeping the money within the British Empire rather than paying money out to the Spanish Empire, the French Empire, etc., etc. We're going to see that between 1651 and 1733, Parliament is going to pass 4 different types of mercantilist regulations to really put this policy into action. The first of these mercantilist regulations is the Navigation Act of 1651. Basically, this is going to say that all trade within the British Empire had to be conducted on English or colonial ships. They also would say that the crews on those ships had to be made up of at least half of them had to be Englishmen or colonists. This was specifically aimed at the Dutch. The thing is, the Dutch really dominated a lot of England's overseas trade, so they're trying to take that back away from the Dutch. The second of these mercantilist regulations would be dealing with enumerated products. Basically, enumerated products were certain colonial goods that could only be shipped to England or another English colony. This would have a whole list of products. It would include things like tobacco, sugar, indigo, cotton, rice. So it's a lot of this big staple commodities and everything. Later on, they will add others. Also, a quick note, we're going to see that European goods have to pass through England before going to the colonies. The reason for this is if you bought like a hat from France and you were living in, let's say, the Virginia colony, now it has to pass through England and it's taxed there when it enters the English ports, and then it ships all the way to Virginia. What that means is it makes it a little bit more expensive, and maybe you'll go, I'll just buy that hat from an English merchant instead. Now, the third and fourth of these mercantilist regulations were really dealing with trying to help out English manufacturers who produced a lot of items for the colonial market. It'd be things like Parliament. Parliament, by the way, we should talk about Parliament is the legislative body over in England. So whenever I talk about Parliament, know what that is. Parliament is going to subsidize certain goods, basically. They're also going to set up other laws that would protect English manufacturers by doing things like prohibiting the colonists from manufacturing certain items on a large scale. So certain items can only be basically manufactured in England for production to be sold to the British colonies. The thing is, with these regulations in place, Great Britain's commercial goals were really largely achieved. We do see the Dutch lose their preeminence in Atlantic trade. In fact, colonial trade is going to really help England's economy grow, and London actually grew to be the largest city in Western Europe during this time. We also see, you might have been going, wait, this sounds like it's great for England, but what about the British colonists? They're not getting as good of a deal. The thing is, the colonists do get something out of this. They have a lot of protections, such as they have protected markets where they can sell their raw materials to. They also generally had low prices on English imports and equal terms of credit with English traders, which is great for, setting yourself up and establishing yourself. Now, the other reason this works so well is because smuggling still happens. The thing is, custom officials were hard-pressed to stop smuggling because they got a lot of their income from the fines. This would be like if police officers were paid based off of how many people they pulled over for speeding. So obviously then you want people to speed so that you can pull more people over. The other thing is, at this time period, a lot of customs officials would find it easier just to accept bribes and look the other way when it came to smuggling. But what this really means is that they're not pushing for perfection. And British officials, therefore, aren't putting too much pressure on this system of trade that ends up working rather well because of that. So if you did want that Dutch tea rather than the English tea, you probably still could get your hands on it because of smuggling, and it probably would be relatively cheap. So I ask you this as a part of your journal: how can you compare this to global trade today? So you can talk about smuggling or something like that, but you can also jump to anything with mercantilism, anything basically from this whole section. What is similar to today? What is different when compared to today?